I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with House of the Dragon Supervising Sound Editor, Al Sirkett. Al, first of all, congratulations are in order on your Emmy nomination.
Thank you very much. It was I've never been nominated for an Emmy before, so it was a wonderful, really lovely thing for me and the whole team. I think on a first season of something up against such stiff competition, it was a really lovely thing to get. So yeah, we're chuffed to bits over here.
You know, it's so true. In this day and age, there's so much amazing content on television, and to be recognized, to be whittled down into this very elite list of artists is such an achievement. Although you did just come off a BAFTA win for the show, so that's pretty remarkable. But how did you find out you were nominated? Is it just one of those stories where you get a text and you're like, okay, I'm nominated? How did that go?
I was having having a text conversation with someone I'd never met before, and they suddenly popped in and just said, "Oh, congratulations on the nomination!" And I knew they were coming out, but yeah, it was wonderful. It was a very interesting morning of lots of congratulatory phone calls and messages, and all of us being really chuffed to bits for it. So
That's awesome. For people who don't know, generally speaking, everybody submits an episode for Emmy consideration, and you and your team submitted the Black Queen, the season finale, which is, I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer because the Dance of the Dragons and there's so much that's going on in that episode in terms of action, but also in terms of dialogue. And then, of course, that final shot of Queen Rhaenyra, which is always seared onto my retina. What was the thing that really pushed you to choose that episode as your best work of the season?
it was a tough one. I think I really like. There's two or three real standout episodes for me. I think Damon's battle, where you have a 10-15 minute long section of no dialogue, which obviously is all about sound effects, and Ramin's amazing score as always. I really liked episode one. I think what Miguel directed in episode one and what Tim Porter brought together in episode one, not only was it a fantastic episode, but you were trying to persuade a lot of people to come back to a show that maybe after season 8, obviously there was some people weren't very happy with it. It's still fantastic TV. But I think what he did with that episode was absolutely amazing to get new people and past fans of Game of Thrones. But I think just we'd had such a ride through all the episodes. We'd got up to speed with where Miguel and Ryan wanted us to be, and how we could do what they wanted us to do and get into the zone in their headspace of how they wanted it to feel. Obviously, we were always going to pick an episode where there was lots of dragon action, to allow Paula to do her amazing dragon work. Having come off the back of the previous episode with the dragon coming out and that in the set, so it was tough. But I think, like you said, there was so much energy and passion in that last episode with the dialogue, with the action, and I think by the time we got to 10, we knew we were nailing it. Miguel and Ryan were very happy with what we were designing, with the sounds, with the atmospheres, with the ambiences and the crowds and everything that I think just all came together with that last episode. And again, sometimes it's not about the sound, but that last shot of her walking in, I tried to put sound in there and was constantly told by the showrunners, no, you don't need to do that. So sometimes no sound works in an atmospheric way, in a set way as well. So
Yeah, I mean, like when you're working with a score by Ramin Djawadi, like it's such an iconic composer these days after his work on Game of Thrones. And I'm curious then, in your mind as a sound editor, and of course with your close relationship with the sound mixers and the music supervisor and music editors and so on and so forth, how do you think music in all its forms and enhances or amplifies the storytelling, particularly from your perspective when you're looking at the soundscape of the show?
A lot of what we do is again when there's council chamber or in the set and in these places where we have a moment to establish an environment and a feeling of of how the city is functioning outside this little inside group of people. Um, it's trying to sell that ambience and that vibe, for want of a better phrase. And Ramin just does that. It always, he just gets the feeling, and I think it's over all the series of Game of Thrones, we've come to feel that that is part of it.
Mhm.
Um, and he just does it so well. There was never, as a sound designer, as a supervising sound editor, I'm kind of sometimes in that process of I'd like to do something so good that they take the music away. And
Yeah.
that's kind of, I think of a goal of for a sound designer is to do something that does what the music does. And music is so evocative and so emotional. If I can do that with sound design or just with some bird tweets or a booming door close going into the throne room and stuff like that, you can never fight against Ramin stuff. It just works. He knows whether it's a love moment or an action moment. There's never a question. There was not once in 10 episodes where you felt a cue was wrong. And I've worked on a lot of films where it's kind of, okay, well, maybe we'll move this cue to here or change that. And that's standard practice, but it never, not once. It just does exactly, he gets it as much as the showrunners get it, really. So yeah, there was never a battle. It's then trying to sculpt what we're doing around so we feed into cues or come out with that same feeling and drift back into sort of reality for that moment. So
Yeah. Um, Given your role in the sound editing team, for people these days are a bit more sophisticated about the differences between the various sound department, the sound mixers, sound editors, and a lot of it has melded, particularly as technology gets better and better. But from your perspective, what do you bring to the table as a supervising sound editor when you have music editors and sound mixers, re-recording artists and different teams, and you've got all the music people? What exactly are you doing as part of that jigsaw puzzle to make the whole?
it's it's having that communication, having the trust of Ryan and Miguel was the important thing for us. Um, we played a lot of stuff. I'd be gathering everything together as we went forward and playing them. Uh, any little mixes we could do before we had to go into the final mix for each episode. So I would try and get stuff in front of them as much as possible and get them to listen to sections where once we'd done the council chamber a few times, they knew we were in a good place. So we didn't really spotting sessions with them after sort of episodes 3 or 4. We would just skip over into new places or action sequences or specific dragon bits and things like that. Whereas with, um, so we knew where we were going and it was trying to build that environment. It was the mix was a different kind of scenario. I'm not, I've, like you say, the lines have been blurred
Yeah.
with technical sort of ability and what people do. It wasn't really set up that I was going to be the re-recording, one of the re-recording mixers next to Doug Cooper. Doug Cooper was the lead re-recording mixer. He was dialogues and music. I'd done so much back and forward with Ryan and Miguel playing them bits with the effects, all the stuff I was getting in from crowd, from Tim Hands, long time Game of Thrones person, and with Paula, again, long time Game of Thrones person, bringing their work together with the Foley and the dialogue and doing little mixes so I could kind of give Ryan and Miguel an idea of what we were going to do.
Mhm.
And we got into the mix and it was like, okay, well, who's going to be on the effects side? And I was like, well, there's various people in the facility um, and they said, but you've been playing us everything. You know what we want. When we've asked for adjustments, you've made those adjustments. Why don't you sit there? Why aren't you sitting in that seat? And I was like, I can if you want, and I was very happy to. It surprised me more than I think it surprised other people, but it's what sound designers and sound effects editors and supervisors do. It is about bringing all these elements together and the feeling and the balance of all those things.
Yeah.
So it was wonderful. It was absolutely amazing to be on that side of the desk working with Doug, who I've respected for years, which is why we went with Doug. And yeah, it was lovely, and it meant that communication was fantastic. It was even tiny little things that we'd spoken about weeks or months before were very easy to get into the system and go, okay, yeah, go back to 3, that bit where you came in and out of that, right, great.
Yeah.
So I think it was just that consistency from the early spotting sessions, every tiny note. I had a half an hour long conversation with Miguel at one point about a necklace, about how the necklace should sound and
Oh,
why I wanted it to sound one way and why he thought it. And we had a long conversation from different points of view. And we got to the end, and he just said, I kind of disagree with with the level of what you're doing, with the level of the sound, but I absolutely buy into why you want it to sound like that at that level and the importance it carries on, not just for that moment, but for the arc of that show and beyond. So just those little bits, all those bits of communication early on helped me. I always said to Ryan the other day that my brain's always working at sort of 5 or 10% House of the Dragon. Now I'm on the show. And I said, it's great. Any piece of information while they're shooting the second series at the moment just fills me up, so that when I start the show, when we go into the second series, I'm back up to 80-90% House of the Dragon. And it's just, I get every last little detail is there. So
It's just always running in your veins, just so that you're ready to go. I love that. I also love it how you can collaborate so profoundly, and then when push comes to shove, they rely on your expertise, and that must be so gratifying as an artist, particularly with your experience. Which brings me to this, actually. I'm always curious from sound editors. I love it. I love interviewing sound editors because you're like music supervisors in that in the real world, you're always listening. You're always like cataloging, I think. Are you like that? Especially while you're working on House of the Dragon, you're cataloging every sound and recording things and putting this away in case you might need it later.
there's always, yes, my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter always jokes that we'll go somewhere and I'll suddenly go and look slightly confused or annoyed or something, and there'll be something that I'll pick up, and it happens again. All the other great shows that we're nominated with, loved watching them, absolutely. It was, so to hear what other people are doing is a constant feedback. We don't live in a bubble of oh, okay, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to make it sound like that, or I was going to make it sound like Game of Thrones. It's about picking up and finding interesting ways of doing things, and how we can use sound emotionally. Like I said, it's against Ramin's score, which is that uplifting or emotional ride that he takes you on.
Yeah.
I like to think that we can do that with sound effects as well, with just with birds and wind. You can really just make those textures into something interesting that affect the audience in a way maybe they don't even realize.
Yeah, actually, it's really important for viewers to realize that the sound department is not always about that more sound equals the best sound, or all the crashes and bangs, explosions. They're all great, particularly if you're listening in surround sound or even an IMAX theater. But I really love it when the sound department sometimes leans into the silence, and we can hear that crisp dialogue. We can hear the ambient sound, the fire crackling, the footsteps. Do you live for those moments as well? Because they're actually way more nuanced and sometimes quite complicated to get right, aren't they?
Yeah, it's those tiny details. It's taking out. Once everything comes together from everybody, not with the dialogue. The dialogue is golden and brilliant writing in the first series, I think. But it's finding those gaps around that help tell the story. That can be just some footsteps passing by, or a piece of paper. Like I said, the necklace. It's in the first episode. You're in the throne room. You know that everybody who's come in for this episode is like, wow, we're in the throne room, and Valerian steel on the necklace. And for me, it was about that tiny detail on a close-up forget the vast space and the city beyond. It was those little bits. I lean very heavily towards the importance of Foley in
Yeah,
those sense. And the guys, Barnaby and Keith, who were the Foley people on the first series, were fantastic. Their texture and their attention to detail and their feeling of natural environment and space when they're recording the Foley to make it just blend in gives you that sense of reality, gives you that
yeah,
sense of being there and feeling like from the biggest party. Yeah, the tiniest noise in the noisiest environment can sell something. It
yeah,
doesn't all have to be. There's the fight at the end of episode 5 at the wedding.
yeah,
So all of that's going on, but it came down. We've got fighting in chairs, people shouting and screaming, but it came down for me. It came down to those small details within that, and it finishes with the rat scurrying in and drinking the blood. And I might have spent more time on the little scurry in just to make it feel a bit natural. I knew you'd get a reaction from the audience, but just to make it feel real.
yeah,
And things like the doors, things like that. It's the detail within the door you don't want, especially into the throne room. You don't just want a big clash. It's every last bit. Again, feed with direction from Ryan and Miguel about how we should feel about this. The place is in slight decay because of the rats. They've put these things in there, these little pieces of information, just to kind of show you that the place is in decay. So that feeds into everything I do. Okay, all the doors aren't being oiled every week like they should be, and everything is just slightly falling apart. So we take that into what we're doing, and try and move forward with that just to help support this idea that everything is coming apart.
yeah. It grounds us in that reality. What it does, like to me, it takes us out of. We know we're watching something artificial. It's artifice, of course, but sound does something, and it makes us just believe. And that necklace thing, for example, no one would probably have noticed it, but they have subliminally, and that's what makes your job so interesting. Because if you don't get it right, then we're always going to feel a little off, a little separated from the action, don't you think?
I think it's very much with sound. It's a lot of what we do is possibly for just 0.1% of the people are the ones who will notice it, and they're usually people who do our job, and they'll go, "Oh, I like the way they've done that." But hopefully, we can affect a lot of people with those sounds, like you say, without them actually noticing. And yeah, I love the fact that we can try and do that, and it is those establishing shots and building the environment and the heat. And again, if we end up going back to the up to the north to the wall, it's how there's only so many things you can do. You can show white snow, but just getting that biting wind sound, and it can be just a little eddy of wind or something, will just hopefully just make the audience go, "Oh, I feel cold."
Yeah,
It is finding those little bits that they don't notice, but work.
but they kind of do. Al, thank you so much for your insight. Congrats again on your first ever, hopefully first of many Emmy nominations, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Rob. Have a good day.